Welcome to the Lady Up America podcast. I'm Diane Canada, your host. I'm so glad you're here today. Thanks for tuning in. Ladies, today I've got a very special guest that I am excited to introduce you to. Her name is Shug Bury, and you may recognize her. She's had a radio show and a podcast for many years, but we're going to be talking about something very near and dear to her heart and to mine today. So I'll be right back.
Around this town, lady up around this town, victory on the battleground, we claim it now. Lady up, lady up, lady up, lady up.
All right, ladies, welcome back. I can't wait for you to meet Shug Bury. Let me tell you a little bit about her before I bring her into the show. She is the founder and the president of Him for Her Ministries. Captivating speaker, a leader, an evangelist who feels right at home in the middle of the darkest places in the world. For 20 years, Shug has been encouraging people nationally and internationally through conferences, churches, events, like I mentioned, radio and podcasting. And she's also got a prison ministry. She wants to claim back what is theirs, a resurrected, victorious life for inmates. Shug's evangelistic invitations have taken her to some of the most spiritually troubled places around the globe. Her stories and experiences will absolutely astound you. She continued to say yes to God's invitations, realized receiving the gospel is just the beginning of a new life in Christ. She founded Him for Her Ministries to carry out the work of healing and redemption beyond the walls of prison. Shug was born and raised in Minnesota. She holds a degree from University of Minnesota, and she loves cycling and traveling around on her RV. She's been married for 38 years to her high school sweetheart, Blair. They've got 2 grown children and 2 cute pit bulls named Buster and Blue. And you're going to see today she's actually joining us from her RV. Would y'all please welcome to the show, Shug Bury. Hey, Shug.
Hi, Diane. Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm in the beautiful state of Michigan today, but we travel the country and we share the good news of Jesus Christ, as well as prison mentoring and the radio show. I love to interview people I've met on the road.
I love it. I love it. And that's a beautiful RV that you have. What a fun lifestyle that must be.
It is. It's a lot of fun. When you got a retired husband and I'm working full time, we got to figure out how to balance that.
Awesome. I'll tell you, with technology these days, it's just amazing what we can do. I'm really excited to talk with you today because, we hear a lot. I mean, obviously my show is politically leaning and I know that's, yours is more ministry related, but around prison reform, we hear about criminal justice reform. We hear about all these things that are kind of being, spilled out into talking points and narratives. And, I've taught in the prison. I know you've been in prison ministry for a long time, but I think it would be so interesting for women to understand what goes on behind the walls of prison, like how people end up in there. What is it like? What is a day in the life like in there? I think if we just can help maybe stir the compassion in people who are listening a little bit, and hear from you today, I think it's going to be a really powerful conversation. So I would love to first just ask you, what drew you to prison ministry?
Well, that's a story in itself, I tell you. Clearly was a calling. I'm an evangelist and I preach around the nation, and I was invited to come into the prison and share. And I was a nervous wreck and I was scared, and oh my gosh, prison,
Yeah.
that's not a good fit for me. And as I was writing my message, which was about women of the Bible that God used right where they were, I was driving to a copying center so I could make copies for the women there. And I am talking to God like the Israelites with the manna. Oh, Lord, what am I doing? Why am I going there? This is not a good fit. Why did you invite me to come here? And honestly, I'm not kidding you, Diane. A hand came through my car, and it was God. And he said, not in a loving voice, but in a very stern voice, I have created you for a time such as this. And I pulled over to the side of the road and I was shaking like a leaf because I felt that hand of God. And
Wow.
I saw my life, Diane, no kidding, flash before my eyes. All my wayward years as a teen, we brought in 2 foster care kids for a while, and just the experience that I've had with people on the fringe of society. And I thought to myself, I am blessed. I haven't been put into prison because of my past. I
Yeah.
get to walk in the front door. And ever since then, no kidding, I go into prison that night and I was supposed to speak for a full hour. And I could see my notes go like a Rolodex in my head. I never had to look at my notes once. And I have been in prison ever since. And that was 23 years ago.
Wow. This is one thing I always say is that you have to be anointed for it. God, obviously you are. When you say you went in, you knew that God was calling you to that. You went in, the wind was at your back. There was a sense of effortlessness to it. That's when you know you're right in the center of his will. I wouldn't recommend it for people who are not anointed necessarily, but it's because it is a very,
It's a calling.
yeah, it's a calling. It is. God bless you for doing that. I think that's beautiful. It was very similar for me. I don't mean to compare mine to yours. I just was in teaching an entrepreneurship class. I did it for like 4 years. One day a week, I'd spend about 3 or 4 hours in there teaching a class. And when I first went in, I mean, just the going, just the getting to the classroom, getting in through the security and the big metal doors that close. I mean, it is a very intimidating place to go into. But like you say, we get to walk out. The women that go in that don't get to walk out, you really, when you're called to it, the first 3 years I felt very anointed for it. The last year God told me get out. It was very clear that he wanted me out. When he's done with a chapter, he closes it. But those first 3 years I felt the same way, just going in. Did you have a heart for the women right away?
Yeah, well, I talked to God. We had a heart to heart once I got home after that first night. And I just said, God, I can't love a woman like you do, who's
Yeah.
done some of the crimes that she has done.
Yeah.
And so I need to have your eyes and your heart and get rid of my judgment. I mean,
Yeah.
hello, my motto is you're going to do the crime, you're going to do the time. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
But once they're in there doing their time, what are we doing to help lift them up and give them a second chance in life? Once they finish out their sentence, they get thrown back out into society, and it's a proven statistic. And I'm just going to throw a couple out for you just for a minute.
Yeah.
95% of everyone who's incarcerated in the United States, which is over 2.2 million, get released. And they get released out into your own backyard. And you got to think about this. Of all the people incarcerated, it's on average now today about $50,000 a year per inmate for our taxpayer dollars to keep them incarcerated. And then if you walk alongside that individual and help them when they're released, the statistic drops from 85% reoffense within 3 years, drops all the way down to 8%. And so
really,
we're making a difference. And
8%.
I have to tell you, we started a mentorship program. I was in for over 20 years preaching the gospel. I was in dealing with the women. I would see them come up to me saved and sober and thinking straight for the first time. And they just start to cry. And they're like, Shug, I'm afraid to leave. I mean, yeah, I hate prison, but I'm afraid to leave for what's waiting for me on the outside, which is
yes.
And then they would get released, and I'd watch them come back in, Diane, and they'd be all sad and they're depressed. And I would look at them and I'm thinking, Lord, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
So I started a mentorship program inside of prison. And it's a difficult thing to do. And I'm going to just share just for a minute why that is. Because inside of prison, they either want you to come in as a volunteer and walk out the door, or they want you to deal with women after they get released, but they don't want you doing both. And there's security reasons for why they feel that. Passing information, et cetera. But after years of working on this with the prison system, we are able to go inside a prison 6 months to a year prior to the release. And then we walk with them on the release day, and we help them up to 1 year post-release. It's amazing.
That's beautiful. That is everything. A couple things you said I want to just go back and revisit. One is that we are all one bad decision away from being in there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is so easy. One emotional, giving into our emotions once, or I mean, I'm not saying that everyone's capable of criminal behavior. I'm just saying that under the right conditions, we'd be surprised what we're capable of. But you're so right that the recidivism rate is so high. And we saw that here in Tennessee in the prison that I was teaching in. And it would break my heart when I would see girls that I knew had so much potential and they had done so well in the program, and then they would end up back in there. It is heartbreaking. And that it was the same scenario that I saw. The women were terrified to come out because who are they going to come back out to? Usually the very people that were bad influences or whatever that helped them end up in there. They don't have that support system on the outside or any starting point. I mean, it's just difficult to even get a driver's license, to pay fines and things like that, to even be able to get from ground zero to even start. Talk a little bit about, before we go into how you help them, because I really want to dig into that, but let's just kind of get an idea of what a day in the life is like in prison. Like, help us to understand, what's it like for these ladies when they're incarcerated.
Well, I see it from the volunteer standpoint, and everything else that I know about the inside of prison is what I hear from the inmates. Sometimes that's slanted as well. But when I walk in as a volunteer and I'm coming in, you'd already addressed this. You go through the security and the slamming doors and the searches and this and that. And I want you friends to know that there's a difference between jail and prison ministry. Jail ministry, they are fresh off the street. They just got arrested. They're in there. They're going through detox. They're a lot harder. They're a lot tougher. I have such a I've just got such a heart for those people that are doing jail ministries, because it's a hard ministry to do. We are doing prison ministry, which means a lot of these people could have been incarcerated many, 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 many times. Judges finally said, we're done with you. You're going to be ending up going into prison, and it's going to be longer than a year, and it can be up to a life sentence. And so we're inside a prison, which is a little different scenario than what jail looks like. In jail, they're walking with cuffs no matter where they go, and then they get uncuffed when they get to the destination. In prison, there's something called a movement, where the announcement goes off, kind of like high school. There's an announcement goes off, movement, and then that's when they can move from one facility to the other, or one program to the other, or to the cafeteria, wherever they're going. It's a very, very strict place. Every moment is accounted for. They always know where you are and what you're doing. Then they do several counts a day. They call it a count, where they're counting all the inmates. Are they all here? They do lockdowns if distress or something happens. And some of the things that you hear and see are so sad. I mean, women swallowing razor blades so that they can get put into the hospital and get some drugs. And then when that happens, then they got to lock down the prison. And we've been in there when that's happened. They do a lockdown because they don't have enough officers to monitor everybody. So they wanted to lock down while they take care of that person who's going to the hospital. It is probably the most forgotten part of society. It's the biggest hurting part of society. And I remember one of the first times I walked in, I'm looking at the ladies in the room, and they're hardened. They look tough. They're weathered. You've seen people who are drug users, and almost 95% of the people are incarcerated. It's because of a drug-related crime. Either they wanted to get high and they caused the crime, or they were high when they did the crime and they weren't aware, whatever. There's just all sorts of reasons. And the other one is crimes of passion or crimes of poverty, where people are stealing. So that's the hardest part. And you walk in and they're hardened and they look tough. And you're thinking, man, they're not going to be able to relate to me. I don't know how we're going to be able to talk and communicate. And they're doing gang symbols amongst each other,
I've seen that.
Things like that. But what happens is, I would go in and preach the gospel. Now, there's different levels to our ministry besides just that. But I would go in and share on Sunday. So we had upwards of 200 women in an evening total, 2 back-to-back services. And honestly, you watch them come in and they sit down in their chairs, and then you start to share the gospel. And when you share the love of Jesus Christ, I got to tell you, first off, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with God. I'm just opening up my big mouth so I can share. But you start to share the good news and the gospel and how they're loved. And for some of them, it's the first time they've ever heard this. And I have watched, no kidding, the Holy Spirit melt some of the hardest of hearts inside of prison as they raised their hand and said, yes, I need Jesus. I need a new beginning. I need a do-over. Rescue me from this pit of hell that I have found myself in. It chokes me up just thinking about it.
Me too.
All we're doing is just opening our hearts out and getting the love thing right. And
because, Shug, isn't it? It's so true. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you have something else?
Go ahead.
I think that is the key right there. Is only Jesus can turn their life around. What I've seen is that no program, they're always going to be so susceptible and vulnerable to slipping back into old habits when they come out, or
Mhm.
just when I can remember, because even though I taught entrepreneurship, it was still, I would sneak in my love for them to Jesus's love for them. And, and I didn't apologize for it. I was very unapologetic, and I would just share it like, hey, I'm not trying to push anything on you. This is just what I believe. And I can remember these girls, when they hear for the very first time that they are valuable, that they are so loved, isn't it beautiful how it's almost like you can just, they've never heard anything like that before. All they ever hear is how all the bad stuff, how awful they are, how they're never going to amount to anything, all that stuff. But when people like you come in and you start to share God's love with them, and it starts to click that they are valuable, that they are worthy of love, that they have something to offer the world, that there's a purpose for their life. That melting away of the hardness that you're talking about is so beautiful. And
It-
only he can do that. Like there's nothing else that penetrates like that, like him.
Yeah, I love it. And the other thing that is really cool to see is baptisms. So we baptized
Oh,
over 700 women in the years that I've been up.
oh my gosh, how
And it
wonderful.
was full immersion. We'd bring the big tub in. It was a big event. All the
Oh,
prisoners would come. It was like cheering for a big Vikings football game. I mean, they were so excited. Woo, 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 and they're all excited. And so, but the women, I mean, you're looking at these gals, they're covered in tattoos. They walk up, they're all cool. And then they get in the tub and they start to shake. And they say, this
yes.
better work. I really want this to work. And
Oh,
then, super cool, you pull them down into the water and you watch the water swirl around their face and they come
mm,
back up. And I'm not kidding, they are new women in Jesus Christ. They are new. And the
man.
whole entire prison erupts and everybody's all happy for at least a week inside of prison
Oh,
because everybody's excited. But it's what happens afterwards that really breaks my heart. And that is the women are changing inside of prison. There's programming inside of prison. There's opportunities for them to better themselves. But what
mhm.
they're scared about is who's going to come alongside me and show me a new way to live. And that's, of course, why we started the mentorship program.
It's precious. So the why behind it then, obviously your heart for the Lord and helping them to understand their worth and their value and all of that. But let's kind of dig a little bit deeper. Like, can you give us an example of maybe like just a case study or something, an example of a woman that you saw transform and maybe her where she's walking now?
Yep. Yeah, I tell you, we've had some cases that, this is the way it works. They have to fill out an application to be part of him for her mentoring inside of prison. And
Hmm.
I've got all sorts of questions on there. What have you done inside of prison to better yourself? What are you hoping to get out of this program? There's all sorts of questions that we look at and we read so
Hmm.
that we can understand where they're coming from. And we accept them or we don't accept them based on that application. When we accept, or they might be coming out too soon because we need 6 months to a year prior to their release.
Okay.
And we go in and visit them every other week, face to face. And they get a chance to visit with us. And then on the off week, we do phone calls and emails. So you really have a chance to get to know this woman. And of course, at
Hmm.
first, they're all tough. I don't trust you. Who are you? Getting your
Yeah.
notch, Christian belt, that kind of a thing.
Hmm.
But then they start to soften up a little. And we try to work with their short term goals and their long term goals. And we had
Hmm.
one gal in our program where she was freaking out about, oh my gosh, I got to get my kids back. I got to find a place to live. I got to find a job because now they're sober and thinking straight for the first time.
Yeah,
And
it's overwhelming.
in a
Those
long time.
decisions are overwhelming.
And it's like
Hmm.
I've heard them say it's like I've woken up to a bad dream where I've lost everything. And they want
Hmm.
to gain back their life. They really want to turn around. And you can tell the women that are using inside a prison or, they can get drugs inside of prison. I know they find that hard to believe, but it's possible. But,
Yeah.
and you can tell, God's given me this street sense that you can pick up on whether or not they're using the system or what they're doing. But
Yeah.
you can tell also the ones who really want to try. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, to answer your question, it's the toughest looking one, the one that nobody else wanted to take as a mentor, but I would. And it's just so fun to see what God does. I had a gal, one of the toughest gals in prison. She looked tough. She joined our program. She got out. She had several severe offenses on her record. She got out. She couldn't find a job. No one would hire her. She couldn't find any housing. We helped her with housing. We helped her find a job. We helped her to the point where she was able to get a car and drive to jobs and work for Uber and work
Wow.
for all these other places. And it just was so cool to see her rise up and be a productive citizen. But the coolest thing after that is then she started tithing back to our ministry. You know, the
Oh,
little bit that she
wow.
started tithing back to us. And I tell you, Diane, there's nothing better than watching someone where society thought she's a throwaway person. She'll
Yeah.
never amount to anything. And all we did was walk alongside her, share with her the love of Jesus, and encourage her on what direction to go in, on how to turn her life around. Amazing.
Oh, that's
Amazing.
amazing. That's beautiful. Well, you're right. They're coming back into society. They're coming back into our neighborhoods, into places that we visit. And if we don't have a pathway for them to, to a better life, if they're just either they're just going to end up right back in there committing another offense. If they don't, I think we all take for granted, not all, a lot of us take for granted that there are simple things we should just know how to do. But when a lot of these girls, what I've seen is they came up in a life of crime. They came out of families or friend groups and all that where crime was just a part of their everyday life. So the things that we take for granted are just normal to know how to function in society is all brand new to them. They don't understand what it means to go to build credit or to even drive a car. The simple things that hold them back from being able to move forward in their lives that we take for granted are just massive mountains for them.
That's an excellent point, Diane, because I had a friend come up to me and say, my relative is living with me. She can't get out of bed. She doesn't fill out applications. She just go get a job. She's putting her head under the covers. I said, of course. She's been living a crime life her whole life. And now she's expected to go out and be a productive citizen. And she has no idea how to do that.
Where to even start? Yeah.
Wake her up in the morning, have a cup of coffee together, take an application, help her fill out the application, call the company before you even fill an application to find out if they're felon friendly. Because it's amazing how many companies say they're felon friendly, this is again something that just gets me. They say they're felon friendly. And then I've introduced them to one of our mentees. They hire them. The mentee has been very productive, worked really hard for them for a year. And then all of a sudden they do a background check and they fire them. And I'm like, what? You knew about this. You already knew about the background check. This happens time and time and time again.
Oh,
So
after a year?
Yes. And they know they're good workers because they've already proven themselves. And that's the challenge for some of the women leaving prison is that they have to work twice as hard as anybody else to keep the same job because everybody's watching, everybody's looking. And I tell them, always be upfront and honest with your boss, the one who's interviewing you. You don't have to tell any of the employees, but just be upfront with the person that's your boss so that they understand where you're coming from and that you really want to work and you want to turn their life around.
Yeah. And there's a part, one of the things I've always tried to do too is balance this with the understanding that that's just part of it, like to not coddle that, but to just say, hey, this is part of your reentry. This is part of you moving forward. You're going to have to accept that you're going to have to work twice as hard and that there's going to be eyes on you and all that. You have to understand that. That's reasonable, because out of respect for the people, for their victims, things like that. I mean, there's a real harshness, a hard-hearted attitude that I see in a lot of people that they kind of feel that way. They feel like, well, it should be hard. Well, good. I'm glad it's hard. They shouldn't be able to reacclimate. But the thing about it is that they're coming back into society one way or the other. So do we want them to come back with hope and with a pathway, or do we want them to just come back and reoffend and back in there? Like you say, it takes so much of our tax dollars just to house them and feed them for, every year that they're in prison. So we're paying for it one way or the other, and I think if people would, I understand the fear, and I understand that if there's even a halfway house or something like that in a neighborhood near where you live, it is unnerving to think that, because not everyone is trying to find a pathway to better themselves. There are people you should legitimately fear that are dangerous. But in this case, how do you transition them? Like, do you have organizations that you team up with, or does it look kind of like a halfway house situation when they're first coming out, or what is their pathway?
Well, each person is totally unique, and each situation is unique. We work with the caseworkers and the parole officers. Oftentimes, they have to go to a halfway house as part of their parole when they get out. A halfway house is very beneficial. because they have an opportunity to go to work. They're held accountable the whole time. They can come back. They're basically still on what they call paper in the prison. And so they're on parole. They're being watched. They have curfews, et cetera. And so a halfway house is a good thing for people who are trying to start their life over again. And then the transition that we do as we're working with them, a lot of them go to adult and teen challenges as well, where they want to finish their rehab. Prison just wasn't long enough. You've been using your whole life and you're only in there for 2 years. Well, that's not really necessarily always the best, just to throw them out into society. So we also work with drug rehab programs where they go and they live there. So that's like a halfway house. They have a chance to have that support and the camaraderie of other people around them that are in the same situation they are, and they become sober and clean and straight. There's graduate programs on that as well. So we can't just expect people who have committed crimes in our society thrown into prison. Like I said, I'm all about you do the crime, you do the time. But then once you're in prison, we need to help rehabilitate them.
Yeah.
We need to have them feel that there's community out there that wants to give them a second chance in life and wants to give them a leg up. Not a handout, don't get me wrong, but a leg up. And a lot of the community that we work with and that we partner with, we've got scholarship programs. If they want to get an education, we help the women get on their feet with their short-term goals, with clothing and food and housing and opportunities for jobs. And then we look at long-term goals. What do you want to do? Do you want to go back to school? We've got a scholarship program where we help you in that as well. Do you want to go and get your GED, or do you want to get your CDL driver's license, or whatever? Because if you can give an inmate a job, someone who's coming out of prison, who wants to be clean and sober, who wants to do their life over again, you can transform not just them, Diane, but generations to come.
Yes.
It's a very generational, family-oriented, terrible curse that's on a lot of the families in America.
Yeah. I'm sure that's absolutely true. And again, just in the little bit that I've seen, that has proven to be true. The ones that find Jesus, they have that hope now in their heart, and then they have that helping hand, that hand up, like you said. It's not a handout, but a hand up. They can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel. They can see where they're going, and they have little, benchmarks they can meet to get to that goal. But I'm sure a lot of them have never even had anyone sit down with them and say, what do you want to do? They probably never thought about it, to actually
and
have
we love
somebody.
that. That's on one of the first visits we have inside a prison, because we're with them up to 6 months before release. And I love their faces when they do, okay, now let's dream together. What is it you want to do? Oh, I just really want, and they give me a real small dream. I said, oh no, let's think big. If you could do anything, what would you like to do? And then we try to keep that in the forefront of their minds, because this is America, and lady up America. I mean, this is what it's all about, Diane, and you know that. And we're all about second chances, new beginnings. God bless America. And we need to rise up together, and we need to rise up with the least of these. Our motto really is that we are helping women, empowering women to rise up and live victoriously in Jesus Christ. And when you walk into a prison, there is no hope. And so that's what our job is to come in.
That's such a worthwhile ministry, such kingdom work that you're doing, Shug. I mean, it's just so, I just want to honor you for that. It is the most important work.
It's all the Lord. Yeah.
How, if people are listening to this and they say, well, I would love to do something like that. How could people get involved in their communities to help?
Well, it's a great question. We have put together a program for other cities and other churches. First of all, you need to have a prison in your area, because we do prison ministry, but this could apply to jail ministry as well. And prison ministry, the benefit of that, it's a little bit longer they're in there for, so you get a chance to really bond with them and get to know them, etc. But we also, this can be applied to jail ministry. And so we will work with you, the individual who's excited about this, to go to their church and say, can we do this together? Is my church willing to open a hand up to help women leaving prison, where we can mentor them and we can go in with them and work with them? We have a whole curriculum where we train those teams. We train the pastors. We have the do's and don'ts of prison ministry of when you're going in. And, the nice thing about our program is that we take everyone who's inside a prison, as long as they don't have any mental illness. a vast amount of mental illness that's outside of our wheelhouse, we'll take almost all applicants because Jesus would too. And if they want to turn their lives around, we want to help them do that. And so we will train your mentors, we'll train the churches, we'll work with you and working with the prison system and how you get up and going and how you get people inside, how you get them certified, etc. And each prison is different and each church and community is different. But all of the training is still the same. I hold a regular training. We just had it last night on the third Tuesday of every month. And we bring in FBI agents and we talk about de-escalation. How do you bring down a situation if it gets excitable? We go in and we have speakers who come to our training who come and talk about mental illness, or speakers who come in and talk about depression, anything that we might have to be dealing with as a mentor to come alongside. And then we have a time where it's just the mentors after the training, where we talk about what's working, what's not, what frustrations am I having with my mentee? How can we come along and support you? What kind of prayers can we lift up? What type of resources do you need to really help her be successful? So it's a community. It takes a village, is what we do, but that mentor who goes in face to face, she's the one who's sacrificing her time for Christ. And he is noticing and he knows. In Hebrews 13, it says, continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison. And Matthew 25:36 also says, I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. Hey, girls, I was in prison and you came to visit me. And he says, whatever you do or did for the least of these, you did for me.
To me. Yes, it's so precious.
My thought, Diane, is I want to be looking at Jesus face to face when I go through those pearly gates, and he's going to say, you got the love thing right with the least of these in society.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it is our job as the church. It is our job. This is our work. And those rewards in heaven, I believe they are coming. We just do it under the Lord. I love that you have this program and that it's duplicatable around the country. Like, people can really come up to speed quick. But I also love that you encourage them to do it alongside other members of their church, so that they're not out there just trying to figure this out on their own. They can have support through their local church.
A community effort. It's a big community effort. We work with therapists. We work with food shelves. It's a community effort, and that's what it's all about. There's no we shouldn't be a one-on-one individual. We should be a community working together to help rebuild people who have destroyed their lives.
That's right. That's right. Such important work. If they want to get involved or learn about this, they go to himforher.org, right?
Himforher.org.
Yeah, and for those listening, only it's HIM, the number 4, her. So him4 her.org. Yeah. And also, I want to give just a quick plug before you go. You've got a podcast that really speaks to women as well, as if you're not busy enough. You also have this great podcast ministry. Talk a little bit about that before you go.
I would love to. Originally when I was invited by Salem Network, the same network that you're on as well. I said, I'm too busy with prison ministry. I don't have time. They said, the cool thing is, Shug, you can talk about prison when you're on. And so, of course, I had to get permission from the Department of Corrections, but I do talk about prison. But mainly the conversation is women's hot topics. So imagine any tough topic that's in America today. We just did one on to vaccinate your kids or not. We've done other ones that really are like, what do people see and say right before they die? Near-death experiences we've had on there as well. So it's a variety of any topics that women deal with day to day, but we look through the lens of Christ. And really, Diane, in this upside down world where right is wrong and wrong is right, we got to get it right through the lens of Christ as we talk about this together. It's a safe place, and there's no topic off limits. We have over almost 300 shows that we've already done, and you can go back and take a look at those. Any podcast platform. So if you listen on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're at, we're on there. Women's Hot Topics. Make sure you put in with Shug Bury, or you'll get some weird stuff pop up. So Women's Hot Topics with Shug Bury. I hope you can come on and listen and like them. Subscribe.
I love it. And that's, again, for those listening, it's SHUGBURY, shugbury.com. You are a force to be reckoned with. I love your heart. I love how you literally have laid it up in your life. I mean, you are out there on the front lines, and you got your hands dirty. You're doing the work. God says that the work is plenty, the laborers are few. So I want to encourage any of the women that are listening, come alongside Shug, get involved in this. They're coming back into our communities one way or the other. Let's be a part. Let's be a change agent and help give them a pathway to better life. And I'll tell you, just from doing it, just a small remnant of what you're doing, it is so rewarding, isn't it? When those women actually start to flourish, it's got to be the most rewarding thing.
And a common question women have who are thinking of becoming a mentor is, I'm not trained in this. I don't have a background in this. Girlfriend, if you love Jesus Christ and you have your heart as your savior, you're trained, you're ready.
Yes.
You do the rest of the training. So don't be feeling you don't have the right background. And if God's calling you to this, if you feel your heart pumping like, man, maybe I should reach out and find out more about this. That's the Holy Spirit, by the way.
Yeah.
And Diane, when you're in the trenches of politics and everything else that's going on, please remember to stand up and hear the cry of the inmates when you're talking to government officials and the policymakers, that we really need to remember those in prison and help to reform them.
Yeah. Amen to that. Amen to that. I sure will. I promise you. Shug Bury, everybody, thank you so much again. So himforher.org, or also check out Women's Hot Topics with Shug Bury. And a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for being with me today.
I'm honored. God bless you, Diane.
You too. All right, ladies, thanks so much for listening. I hope this has been a blessing to you. I want to remind you to pick up my new book, Lady Up America, Training Christian Moms for the Toughest Spiritual Battleground of Our Lifetime. People like Shug and so many of these amazing guests that I am honored to sit with on this program. We're all coming alongside each other. Everybody's got a different flavor of what they're doing, but it's so important that we're all on the battlefield. So I invite you to get the book, consider starting a book club, but whatever you do, please also go and look up all of these amazing things Shug's doing and get involved. Whatever God's leading you to do, answer that call and lady up. See you tomorrow.
Lady up around this house. Lady up around this